Evan Rhodes noticed things other people missed. A clock reflected backward in a window. A wedding ring removed before a family photograph. A shadow falling in the wrong direction. It was why he liked working alone in the basement archive of the Ashbury Historical Society. Old photographs never hurried him. They waited. Every morning, Evan descended the narrow staircase with a thermos of coffee, switched on the scanner, and spent 8 quiet hours restoring pieces of lives that had ended long before his began. He labeled every image carefully. Date, location, names, when known. Then he studied the faces for a few seconds before moving on. He liked imagining what happened immediately after the shutter clicked. Who laughed? Who looked away? Who never returned to that place again? On Monday morning, Archive Box District B-214 was waiting on his desk. Evan had never seen the label before. The cardboard was older than most of the collection, soft at the corners and darkened by moisture. A faded transfer stamp crossed the lid. Ashbury Police, District B Archives. Evan traced the words with one finger. Ashbury had never had police districts, at least not officially. He made a note to ask the curator later. Then he opened the box. Inside were dozens of landscape photographs from Black Pine National Forest. Old trails, fire roads, logging camps, mountain ridges. Nothing unusual. Evan scanned the first image, then the second, then the third. By 11 o'clock, he had processed 47 nearly identical photographs of trees. He was reaching for the next one when the scanner software chimed. Face detected. Evan looked at the screen. The photograph showed a dirt trail winding along the northern ridge. No cabins, no hikers, no people. He leaned closer. The software had drawn 5 small boxes near the center of the image, all of them over empty forest. Not today, Evan muttered. The scanner occasionally mistook rocks or branches for faces. He cleared the detection and scanned the photograph again. The 5 boxes returned. Evan zoomed in. At first, he saw nothing. Then shapes emerged between the trees. 5 people. Tiny. Walking in single file. He adjusted the contrast. Bright synthetic jackets appeared against the faded green landscape. Modern jackets. Modern backpacks. One hiker had a yellow water bottle clipped to the side of her pack. Evan stopped breathing for a moment. He knew that bottle. Everyone in Ashbury knew it. It had appeared on missing person posters for almost a year. Emily Foster, age 29, last seen entering Black Pine National Forest with 4 friends. 5 hikers had disappeared on September 18th. The search had lasted 12 days. Helicopters, drones, tracking dogs, hundreds of volunteers. Nothing had been found. No campsite. No equipment. Not even a clear footprint. The photograph in front of Evan was dated July 1978. Emily Foster had not been born until 1995. Evan sat back slowly. Then he checked the original print. The date was written on the reverse in faded blue ink. July 14th, 1978. North Ridge Trail. He scanned it again. The hikers remained. This time, one of them appeared to be looking toward the camera. Evan picked up his phone, then stopped. Who exactly was he supposed to call? The police? The newspaper? His supervisor, who already believed Evan spent too much time staring at dust. He looked again at the yellow bottle, then searched the Historical Society's digital files for the missing hiker case. The official photographs appeared immediately. Emily with the yellow bottle, Mark in a blue hiking jacket, Jason with an orange climbing helmet attached to his backpack, Olivia wearing a white cap, Noah carrying a red sleeping roll. The people in the 1978 photograph matched all 5 details. Evan called Detective Laura Hayes. She answered after 4 rings. Ashbury Police. My name is Evan Rhodes. I work at the Historical Society. Pause. What do you need? It's about the Black Pine hikers. The silence on the other end changed. Not longer. Heavier? That case is closed, Laura said. I found a photograph. So did half the internet? This one was taken in 1978, Laura exhaled slowly. Mr. Rhodes, I don't know what kind of joke. I know about Emily's bottle. Laura stopped. Evan continued. The yellow one? With the black climbing clip? Mark's jacket has a repaired tear near the left shoulder. Jason has the orange helmet. Noah's sleeping roll is tied incorrectly. How do you know that? They're in the photograph. Another long silence. Then Laura said, Don't send it to anyone. I wasn't planning to. Don't scan it again. Evan glanced at the scanner. Too late. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." She arrived in 12. Laura Hayes looked nothing like Evan expected. No dramatic entrance, no trench coat, no impatient questions. She walked into the archive carrying a paper coffee cup and the exhaustion of someone who had not slept properly in months. She placed the cup beside the scanner. "Show me?" Evan turned the monitor toward her. Laura stared at the image. For several seconds, her expression didn't change. Then she leaned closer. "That's Emily." Evan nodded. Laura pointed. "That's Mark." Her finger moved. "Jason." "Olivia." "Noah." She stopped at the fifth figure. Noah stood slightly behind the others. Even in the blurred image, his posture looked different. He wasn't walking with the group. He was facing the trees. Laura straightened. Where did this come from? Evan showed her the box. She read the faded transfer stamp. "District B. You know what that means?" "No, but you've seen it before." Laura looked at him. He had guessed correctly. She lifted the photograph carefully by its edges. "The paper feels right." "That doesn't mean it is." "No, but it means someone worked very hard to make it feel right." Evan glanced toward her. "You don't believe it. I spent 12 days in that forest looking for 5 people who left no trace. I learned not to believe anything until someone proves it." She picked up her phone and called the department's forensic lab. By late afternoon, the results came back. The photographic paper was consistent with material manufactured in the 1970s. The chemical development process matched. No modern ink. No digital alteration. No evidence the figures had been added. Laura read the report twice, then set it down. Evan said quietly, "So it's real." Laura looked back at the photograph. "The paper is real. That's not the same thing." "No." She picked up the archive box. "We need to know whether there are more." They found the second photograph shortly before sunset. It was buried near the bottom of the box. Black pine forest. 1954. A wooden footbridge crossed a narrow stream. 5 hikers stood beside it, closer than before. The clothing matched again. So did the backpacks. This time, all 5 faced the camera. Emily wasn't smiling. Mark had one hand raised, palm outward, not waving. Warning. Laura sat down. During the original search, she had treated the disappearance like a puzzle that could be solved by covering enough ground. Search every trail, check every ravine, interview every witness. She had believed failure meant they had missed something. Now she wasn't sure the missing piece had existed at the time. Evan scanned the image. Laura immediately noticed the timestamp embedded in the catalog record. The photograph had been donated to the Historical Society in 1962. The donor was listed as Henry Vale. Laura frowned. "Vale? You know the name?" The family owned the Bellwether Hotel. Evan waited for more. Laura gave none. She turned back toward the archive box. "Keep looking." The third photograph was dated 1931. A winter scene? Snow covered the ridge. The 5 hikers stood beneath bare trees. Their modern clothing looked even more impossible against the old landscape. Jason pointed toward something outside the frame. Olivia looked over her shoulder. Noah stood farther away from the group. Evan zoomed in. There was another person between the trees behind Noah, almost hidden. Long coat, face obscured. Laura said, "Can you sharpen that?" "I can sharpen what's there. I can't create detail." "Do it." Evan adjusted the image carefully. The coat became clearer. Gray. The figure's face remained unreadable. Laura watched him. "Does that mean something to you?" Evan shook his head. "Should it?" "No." She answered too quickly. They continued. 1912. The hikers stood on a rocky slope. Emily's hand rested on Mark's shoulder. Noah was now separated by several yards. The gray-coated figure stood closer to him. In the 1882 photograph, only 4 hikers remained with the group. Noah appeared far in the background, alone, facing the others. Laura lined the prints across the archive floor, oldest to newest. Evan stood above them. "They're moving." Laura nodded. "North." "No. Look at their positions." Evan crouched. "They're not just moving through the forest." He pointed from one photograph to the next. "They're getting closer to the photographer." Laura looked again. He was right. In each image, the hikers had advanced slightly toward the camera. Not enough to notice alone. Obvious when placed together. Laura said, "Where were these taken?" Evan checked the archive notes. Different trails. Different photographers. Different years. Then why did they all face the same direction? He pulled an old forest map from a drawer. They marked each location. North Ridge, Old Bridge, Logging Trail, Summit Path. The points formed a line. At the end stood one structure. Black Pine Fire Lookout. built in 1881, closed in 1964. Laura stared at the map. That tower was searched. You went there? Twice. Anything unusual? No. She folded the map. But that was before we knew what to look for. The original negatives were stored at the regional museum. Laura arranged access the next morning. The museum conservator, Samuel Pierce, met them in a climate-controlled room below the main gallery. He wore white gloves and spoke in a whisper, as if the glass plates could hear him. You understand these cannot leave the table? Laura nodded. Samuel opened a padded drawer. Inside lay the 1954 negative. He placed it beneath a light. The bridge appeared. The stream, the trees, no hikers. Evan leaned closer. Where are they? Samuel looked confused. Who? Laura placed the developed print beside the glass negative. Same bridge, same angle, same shadows. But the print contained 5 people. The negative did not. Samuel checked the identification numbers. They matched. He opened another drawer. 1931. Again, the negative showed an empty landscape. The developed print showed the hikers. Samuel removed his glasses. That isn't possible. Evan looked at Laura. The photographs changed after development. Samuel said nothing. He placed both prints into a new archival sleeve. Then noticed writing on the back of the 1931 photograph. Faint pencil. Almost erased. He angled it toward the light. A sentence appeared. They are not in the forest yet. Laura read it twice. What does that mean? Samuel shook his head. Evan asked, who wrote it? The museum records listed the donor. Ashbury Record Photo Department, the newspaper had contributed hundreds of historical images before its archive was transferred. Laura examined the handwriting. It looked recent. Not faded, not aged. She turned the photograph over again. One of the hikers had moved. Mark's raised hand was now lowered. Samuel stepped away from the table. I'm closing the room. Laura picked up the print. You saw that? I saw enough. Laura and Evan returned to the Historical Society. By then, the story had leaked. Someone at the museum had posted anonymously about impossible photographs. Reporters called. Online forums began identifying the hikers from blurred screenshots. People drove toward Black Pine, hoping to find the tower. The park closed the northern trails before sunset. Laura received authorization for one final search. 6 people. Laura, Evan, 2 park rangers, a forensic photographer, and Samuel, who insisted the negatives should be compared at the location where the prints had been taken. The climb began at dawn. Evan was not an outdoorsman. He stepped carefully over roots and checked the trail map every few minutes. Laura moved faster, but frequently looked behind them. Not because she expected someone to follow. Because she had spent a year wondering whether the hikers had been close enough to hear the search teams calling their names. Halfway up the ridge, Evan stopped. A muddy footprint crossed the trail, fresh. The previous night had been dry. Another print appeared farther ahead, then another, bare feet, leading down from the tower. Ranger Cole crouched beside them. No tread, no shoe marks. Laura asked, Human? Cole hesitated. Close enough. The footprints ended at a patch of stone. No tracks continued. Evan photographed them. When he checked the image, the footprints were gone. The camera showed clean rock. He looked down. They were still there. He didn't mention it. Not yet. The tower appeared through the trees at noon. Weathered wood, rusting stairs, windows dark with age. Laura stopped at the base. During the original search, she had climbed those stairs and found nothing. She remembered the empty room, dust, bird nests, an old table. Now, through the lower window, she could see picture frames covering the walls. Those weren't there, she whispered. They climbed. The tower door stood unlocked. Inside, hundreds of photographs covered every surface. Large frames, small frames, black and white, sepia, color. Every image showed black pine forest. And every image contained the same 5 hikers. Evan moved slowly around the room. The progression was unmistakable. In photographs from the 1880s, the hikers were barely visible. In the 1920s, they stood closer. By the 1960s, they had reached the base of the tower. In the 1980s, they were climbing the stairs. A photograph dated 2003 showed Emily's hand on the door. Laura found one dated the day the hikers disappeared, September 18th. The tower interior appeared empty. except for 5 shadows cast across the floor. No people, only shadows. Samuel compared one print with its matching negative. The negative showed an empty room. The developed image showed the shadows. Evan noticed a clean shelf beside the window. No dust. An old leather camera bag rested there. Stamped into the cracked surface, property of the Ashbury record. Inside was a large format camera, a roll of undeveloped film, and one envelope. Laura opened it. A police evidence label had been attached decades earlier. Ashbury Police, District B case status. Transfer incomplete. No case number, no names. Only a time, 10:13. The tower's old wall clock clicked. Everyone turned. It had not been running when they entered. The hands now pointed to 10:12. Evan looked around the photographs. One frame hung alone near the door. Unlike the others, the paper looked new. The date beneath it was tomorrow. It showed the lookout tower from outside. 5 hikers stood at the entrance. Emily closest, her hand raised toward the door. Laura said, "Were they there when we came in?" "No," Evan answered. The wall clock moved. 10:13. 3 knocks sounded from outside. Knock, knock, knock. Nobody moved. Ranger Cole raised his radio. Only static. The knocks came again. Laura approached the door. Evan grabbed her sleeve. "Wait." The photograph had changed. Emily's raised hand now rested against the wooden frame. Noah stood behind the others. The gray-jacketed figure stood beside him. Laura pulled the door open. The landing was empty. Forest below. Wind through the trees. Nothing else. Then Samuel whispered, "Laura." She turned. The photograph changed again. There were now 6 people outside the tower. The 5 hikers. And Laura. She stood beside Emily, looking inward. Laura stepped away from the frame. That wasn't there. Evan said, "We should leave?" A new photograph slipped from the old camera. Nobody had touched it. The paper moved slowly through the rollers. Evan lifted it before it hit the floor. The image developed in his hands. The tower interior, taken from the corner above them. All 6 investigators stood inside. But the photograph showed 7 people. Someone in a gray jacket stood behind Laura. Laura turned around. Nothing. In the photograph, the figure raised a camera. A flash filled the real tower. Every window went white. For 1 second, Evan heard voices. Not screaming. Calling. 5 names repeated from somewhere far away. Emily. Mark. Jason. Olivia. Noah. Then silence returned. The tower was empty. Laura was gone. Her backpack remained on the floor. Her radio continued transmitting static. The new photograph in Evan's hands had changed. Laura now stood outside with the hikers. 6 people, all facing the camera. The gray-jacketed figure was gone. The search for Laura Hayes lasted 9 days. No footprints, no trail, no evidence she had left the tower. The historical photographs were transferred to federal storage. The lookout was sealed. The official report described an accidental disappearance during a restricted site investigation. No mention of the changing photographs. No mention of District B. No mention of the Ashbury record camera. 6 months later, a family returned from a camping trip near Black Pine. They mailed a roll of film to a small photo lab outside Ashbury. Most images were ordinary: trees, campfires, mountain views. One photograph showed the old lookout tower in the distance. The technician nearly skipped it. Then he noticed people standing outside. 6 figures, 5 missing hikers, and Detective Laura Hayes. He scanned the negative. The tower was empty. Only the developed print contained them. The technician increased the resolution. All 6 were looking directly toward the camera. Laura stood at the edge of the group, one hand raised. Pointing behind the photographer, the technician zoomed into the reflection on the camera lens. A person stood behind him. Gray jacket, face hidden, holding another camera. His coworker approached. "What did you find?" "I'm not sure." The technician turned over the envelope. A faded blue stamp marked the back. A. SHB UR Right Record Photo Department. His coworker frowned. "That newspaper still exists." "Barely." "No, I mean that logo." The technician looked at her. "What about it?" "They stopped using it 30 years ago." The overhead lights flickered. The printer beside them activated by itself. A single photograph slid into the tray. It showed the 2 technicians standing in the photo lab. Watching the image of the missing hikers, the photograph was dated tomorrow, and behind them, barely visible near the darkroom door, stood 7 people. The hikers, Laura, and someone wearing a gray jacket. The Black Pine lookout remains closed. The hikers remain missing. So does Laura Hayes. Every few years, a new photograph appears in the Ashbury Historical Society archives, always dated tomorrow, always showing the group somewhere new. A road, a hotel, a police station. Sometimes they're far in the background. Sometimes they're standing close enough to recognize. And in the most recent image, they are no longer looking toward the photographer. They are looking past them, as if something else has finally arrived. If you enjoy mysteries where the evidence becomes more impossible the longer you examine it, subscribe to 10-Minute Mysteries. Then, watch the previous story. They found a second basement under the police station, because the first photograph Evan discovered came from a box labeled District B. And beneath Ashbury Police Station, investigators found records from a district that officially never existed. One of those records may explain why the photographs keep changing, or it may explain who has been taking them.